Hello, this is Vinay Dabholkar. I'm an independent consultant, author, and teacher, and I work in three areas: innovation strategy, design thinking, and mindfulness. And today, I'm really happy to be in conversation with my friend and collaborator, Professor Ganesh Prabhu. Hi, Ganesh.
Hi.
Ganesh is a professor of strategy at Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Actually, he's been there for, we can say, in a few months' time, it'll be quarter of a century. Is that right, Ganesh? Um, yeah, and his areas of interest are strategy, product innovation, and entrepreneurship. In fact, his executive program on new product development, which he's been teaching, maybe this program that he launched with Professor Rishikesh Krishnan might be one of the first ones in Indian management schools that has been running for more than 20 years. Um, Both of us have been collaborating on design thinking. We've been doing these workshops at IIM Bangalore for the past 4 years. And one of the fascinations which comes up that Ganesh brings up his stories on is electric scooters. So recently, Ganesh got his fourth electric scooter. He'll tell us more about it. So what we thought was that we'll keep that electric scooters evolution in India as a theme at the background, and have Ganesh look at this whole thing through this lens of strategy, maybe product innovation, and design thinking. So let's see how it goes. So Ganesh, when did you buy the first electric scooter, and why did you buy electric scooter?
Yeah, so I bought probably the first electric scooter, which was a viable scooter in India, was introduced in 2005 by Eco-Vehicles, and I was one of the first buyers of uh, that scooter. It was launched in Bangalore, and I happened to be one of the first people to buy it. I was using actually a petrol scooter before that. That was the TVS scooty, and I had used it for a few years. Most of the time, earlier I used to go out with the scooter, but that had reduced after the traffic became quite intense around Bangalore. So I was using it primarily to commute within the campus, especially when there was things to be moved around and so on. So the scooter was fine, but only problem was I had to go out to fill petrol, and that used to be a hassle. So I was not very keen on going out with the scooter, and filling petrol was a necessity. So every few days I had to go and fill petrol. And when the electric scooter came, it was immediately a better option for me because I could charge the scooter at home and not take it out at all. So I stay in a campus which is a fairly large campus. So commuting within the campus for classes, for meetings, and so on, this was a good option. So when this electric scooter came, I just went for it. Of course, as it stands, the electric scooter at that point in time, the 2005 period, the electric scooter was around the same price as the TVS scooty. I think it was 29,000 is what I had paid, and the TVS scooty was around the same price at that time. However, the cost of running an electric scooter was much higher because the battery would wear out fairly fast. So the life of a battery that was a gel battery, and that was something that would last only 3 years whether you used it or not. So if you're a heavy user, I mean, you use it every day, you commute maybe 15, 20 kilometers every day, then the battery would not last so long, but at least it will be used. But if you're not a heavy user, then the cost of the battery is on the higher side. So if you look at it from a purely per kilometer basis, the electric scooter was far more expensive than running a petrol scooter at that point in time. But because it was convenient, I went ahead to and bought it. So that particular scooter was actually made out of a kit, I think, imported from China. The whole product was assembled in Bangalore and sold in Bangalore. I actually went and saw the factory also where it was being assembled. It was interesting to see a factory which was really small and right in the center of Bangalore. In one of the most premium areas in Bangalore, they were running a factory in the basement, and the office was on the first floor, and that's all they had. And they had just introduced it, and um, I couldn't buy it from the factory. I had to buy it from a dealer, but that was my first experience of using an electric scooter. So, of course, the battery came along with the scooter at 29,000, but within, I think, after 3 years, when I had to replace it, I had to pay about 12,000 or so for the battery at that time. So that was a big expense, even though I had not used the scooter a lot in the first 3 years. So in that sense, I could realize that the per kilometer cost is on the higher side because, for example, the battery was not even used for about 3,000, 4,000 kilometers, but I had spent 12,000 to replace it. So that way, the per kilometer cost was more than 3 rupees or so in my case. Um, but it was actually a fairly strong powered scooter. Unlike some of the other products which were launched elsewhere in the market, there was Yo Bikes, which was launched in Ahmedabad initially, and that was a much lower powered scooter. So this was a 700-watt motor scooter, and the Yo Bikes had launched a 250-watt scooter. So as at 700 watts, this was okay. You could climb fair inclines and so on without too much of a problem. But other scooters which were launched in the market were low powered and were not really very viable options in Bangalore, especially given that there are steep inclines on the roads in Bangalore. So that was the first one. And should I continue with
from the design
yes.
perspective, do you remember anything from this first scooter?
Yeah, so this product was actually made completely out of plastic. It was, except for um, the main components of the scooter were one is a controller, then you have a motor which was inside the wheel, and then there was a battery which was packed in the center of the scooter. So there were four battery cells which were in the center of the scooter. There was a controller and the motor. So these are the three most important parts. And those were, of course, robust pieces. But the rest of the scooter was fairly, weak in that sense. So it was easy to break it. For example, once it had fallen down and one of the panels had broken, so it had to be replaced. So it was not really a very sturdy vehicle in that sense, but the frame, everything was fine. It was just the body was on the weaker side and was easy to break. But in terms of riding, it was nice in the sense that it was powerful. It was only issue with that was the range was very less. So it was you had to recharge it every 20 kilometers approximately. Though the range that they mentioned was much higher, but realistically speaking, it was around 20, 25 kilometers. You had to recharge it. So it was not really a very viable vehicle for those who are commuting a lot. But for short distances, it made a lot of sense. So for me, it made a lot of sense. But for people who are commuting to work long distance and all, it was not really a good option.
And how did the market look like? I mean, did you know anybody else who had bought also the same vehicle or in
So
Bangalore?
when at that time, what had happened was the dealer who was dealing with this vehicle was dealing only with this vehicle. So it was not somebody who was selling other vehicles. So they had taken exclusive dealers, but because these dealers were trying their best to sell more, they were in a sense pushing the product. So anybody came and inquired, they would say it's a great option. You don't have to pay for petrol. You just so the way it was being pushed was probably not very appropriate because some people may have not found it suitable. In fact, that was a discussion I had with the founder of Eco-Vehicles. He was saying that we have to be careful not to push it to the wrong set of people. In fact, that was what he had mentioned. And I found, but however, the dealer was not really doing what the CEO was saying. So, in a sense, because that was the only business they were trying to push sales, but it would backfire on them if the range was not good and it was not really a viable vehicle for those who are commuting a lot. But for somebody who is, for example, a senior citizen who is using the vehicle only to go to the nearby shopping center or to the bank or post office, this was an ideal vehicle because it was not very difficult. It was not heavy. It was not very difficult to maneuver, and it was easy to charge at home. You didn't have to wait in a petrol station. So it was a good fit for somebody with very light driving requirements, but not for somebody who had heavier driving requirements. So in
Is
that
that
sense,
still continuing?
pushing it to the wrong customer would have been a problem. Yeah.
Sorry, is that still in the market today, Eco-Vehicle or?
No, Eco-Vehicles is no longer there. Eco-Vehicles actually, to some extent, their market was hit after Yo Bikes and many other companies which were importing knockdown kits from China launched their own vehicles. One of the problems that Eco-Vehicles had was that while their vehicle was actually very powerful with a 700-watt motor, most of the other products which came into the market were low powered and were also cheaper. So, for example, Yo Bikes was something in the range of 15,000 or so, and half the price of this vehicle. And it was much lower powered. So, it was not really a viable vehicle for Bangalore. But when other vehicles came into the market, the problem that got created was that electric vehicles were seen as something that were low powered and therefore not worth buying. So a lot of people, even though a high-powered version was available, a lot of people were actually opting out before even examining these vehicles because they thought it was low-powered, it won't work. So, for example, the Yo bike was something that would run at about 15 kilometers per hour, whereas this vehicle was easily able to reach 25 to 30 kilometers per hour. So this was fast and okay, but the Yo bikes and some other brands which were there were actually low powered, and therefore the market sort of, I think, believed that these are all low powered vehicles, not worth buying, and therefore many of them were not successful, I would say.
Okay, yeah, a good point. So when did you then move to your next one?
So the next one, actually, I had this vehicle from 2005 to 2008, and it was fine. It was working fine. Then in 2008, TVS came out with their own electric scooter, and since I had already used the TVS vehicle earlier, TVS scooty, I was very keen on looking at whether TVS had a much better scooter than the one I was using. And I found they had actually done that. So what they had done was interesting in terms of design. They had taken the TVS scooty body and just replaced the engine part. They had redesigned it. So only from the inside it was redesigned to fit in the 4 batteries, and the controller was also fitted into the area which was just below the seat. So they had redesigned the entire inside of the vehicle using the existing scooty body, which meant that the cost of making the body was probably lower because they already had the molds and everything to make the body. It's only the inside which was redone, and it was very elegantly done. I still have that scooter with me. It is from 2008 when I bought it till now. I must have replaced the battery, I think, 3, 4 times. But the vehicle is very well designed and long lasting, I would say. So the body was metallic. It was not plastic. Most of it was metallic, and uh, even the plastic which was used was only on the upper side was pretty good, sturdy stuff. So it has had no problems. But what was interesting is when I went to buy it, I was again I had gone, the product had been launched on a Sunday, I think, and the very next day I had gone there to the dealer. But what TVS had done was to sell the vehicle in the same showroom as the existing petrol vehicles. And there I distinctly remember that the dealer was not very pleased to to sell the product to me. He was trying to push me to buy the TVS scooty, which so I was saying no, I don't want to buy the scooty. I want to buy this. So this dealer was not very favorable. I think maybe because the dealer realized probably that the electric scooter would not give him a recurring income from repairs and doing all these servicing, which a typical petrol scooter would require. The electric scooter has hardly anything which can go wrong. So except for punctures, nothing much goes wrong with the electric scooter, and therefore maintenance is very, very low. And they would have seen that, the product is very easy to examine. So they would have realized that the revenue stream from the petrol vehicle was much higher than the revenue stream from this electric scooter. And that was one of possibly a reason why the dealer was not really very favorable towards selling the electric scooter. But then when I insisted, they sold it. What was interesting was that TVS had basically designed this, they called it Teenz Electric. That was the name, brand name of the scooter. And they had basically designed it for women. Okay, and what they had done to make it appealing to women, I suppose, was they had put all sorts of flowers all around the scooter. So they were very large flowers. It was a black body, but it had some very colorful flowers all over the body. So the first thing when I went to the showroom, was to check whether those flowers could be removed. So that was what because if it could be removed, it would be a problem. I mean, at least I didn't want to ride a scooter which was full of flowers. So when I saw that, I found that it could be removed. It was basically a sticker. So the first thing I did after I brought the scooter home was to remove those flowers. But once I removed them, the scooter black body looked very nice, and that was fine. I mean, but the flowers were a bit of overkill from my point.
Yeah. How did they
Yeah, but I have
position?
seen a few others were also using it,
Okay.
but they had not removed the flowers, so I could see that. Yeah.
How did TVS position this scooter vis-a-vis their competition at that time?
The advertisements were all targeted to women. They were, and they had basically designed it like that. They were trying to push it to the TVS scooty type of customer. One of the advantages, the seat was fairly low, so that was good for women. So from a design point of view, the TVS scooty was well designed for women. It has a low seat. It is suitable for a shorter person, and it worked. So since they were using the same body, they were basically targeting probably the same customer. However, from a lady customer's point of view, this was not necessarily a very good option, I would say, because if you run out of, there is a meter which shows how much charge is left, but it's not a very reliable thing. So if you go 2-3 kilometers, it may suddenly dip, So, and then if you have gone out and the battery runs out, you can't do anything. You have to literally leave it there and go. You can't fill petrol. There is no way to fill petrol. You can't charge it anywhere because it takes several hours to charge it. Even if you want to charge it to a minimum level, it would take an hour or two. So I thought that it was not really a very good option for women to buy, unless, of course, they were using it primarily during the day for very short distances, like if the college is next door or a kilometer or two away. For that type of thing, it would be fine, but it was a bit risky in terms of usage. So in that sense, I'm sure they would have figured out how how it is in terms of what you can do or cannot do with it. So that is one issue.
So did they get their
So
persona?
again, I thought at that point that targeting a different customer group, maybe a senior citizen group and so on, would have been more appropriate than targeting young women, which was what the advertising actually targeted. Yo Bikes was also targeting young college-going kids and so on. So I thought it was not an appropriate target.
Do you know how it did actually in the market? The TVS
The
Teenz?
TVS Scooty, yeah. So the TVS Teens Electric, I think, ran for only about a year.
Okay.
They stopped selling it almost. I think they launched it in 2008. By 2009 or so, it was off the market. I don't know for sure, but that's roughly the time when it was off the market. Um, why it went down? My guess is that one is the women target may not have worked so well.
Yeah.
The other was probably the dealers were not pushing it because the dealers who were selling electric scooters were also selling petrol scooters, which gave them a far better incentive. And the dealers probably didn't want people coming back and saying that there's no range, there is no issue, there's not enough range, and so on, because it was still the gel battery. So the range was limited. Of course, what TVS had done right was that it was a more powerful motor than the 700 watt motor. I think it was about 800 or so, 800, slightly higher than that on the previous scooter. So it was more powerful. It was, and the battery was also good, but range was obviously an issue because if you have a stronger motor, then the range goes down.
Yeah.
So that is a trade-off you are playing with. So the TVS one had a lower range than the earlier one, but it was more powerful.
Okay.
Because the battery was almost the same. So that was one trade-off which you had to deal with.
Right.
So for me, it wasn't a problem, but maybe that was another issue that, and the cost was almost the same. So again, I paid I think 29,000 for the scooter from TVS, almost the same as what I had paid in 2005.
Okay.
Mm.
So let me see. I was going to ask you something. Yeah, I lost it. So this, did you use the same charger, regular charger for this also?
Yeah, so each of these scooters had their own charger. So the scooter, the Teens Electric had their own charger, which had a different type of a plug point
Okay.
into the vehicle. On the other side, of course, it was a 5 ampere plug point.
Okay.
So what I had done was to have a plug point just outside my house,
Okay.
which I could use for either scooter. So at that time, I had both. Um, but after a period of time, after I bought the TVS one, the next battery change I did not do for the other one. So once the battery was exhausted, I did not replace it. I stopped using that older scooter, by which time it had also broken down quite a bit.
Okay.
So the plastic body and all had broken down, and it wasn't worthwhile from my point of view to replace the plastic body. Also, put a battery of which was around 12,000 or so. So that was so one of the concerns with the electric scooter was there was absolutely no way to resell it.
Okay.
If you had a petrol vehicle, you could resell it, but the electric scooter had absolutely no resale value at that time. So that scooter is still lying with me unused. It cannot be sold, it cannot be junked, nothing can be done. So that was one issue. Even the TVS Scooty, which I have, the electric scooter from TVS, is with me, but it's very tough to resell it. It's not possible to resell that product. So that was the situation earlier.
Okay.
And it is those type of scooters, the gel battery scooters, really have no resale value as far as I know.
And this total cost of ownership, the way you roughly calculated for the Ekovehicle, was it now comparable to petrol for Teens electric, or do you think it was still?
No, it was the same. It was very expensive that way. For me, see, it depends on the user. If you're a regular user, you commute maybe 5 to 10 kilometers a day, then it is worthwhile.
Okay.
The cost of ownership would be, I mean, cost of usage and ownership was okay. My usage was much lesser. To that extent, it is still a problem because at the end of 3 years, I have to replace the battery.
I see.
Except that what had happened is over the time from the 2005 till I got this 2008, the battery had also improved a little
Okay.
bit. And the first battery I got on the TVS was far better than the earlier battery. And then when I replaced it in 2011, I replaced it. I got an even better battery. So there was some improvement in the battery, though it was not significant. And all these batteries were imported from China.
I
So
see.
but you had slightly better batteries with slightly more power in the same package, and that's what you could get.
Sure.
So I replaced once in 2011, then I replaced it once in 2014. Like that, every 3 you had to replace the
Okay.
battery.
So, okay. So then let's move on to the next one. How did that? I mean, did this scooter really run out of course, or you really found something attractive to move to the next one?
So the next one was, of course, the Ather, which I bought in 2019. Um, I was following what was happening in Ather to some extent. Had heard about this company starting off on building a scooter maybe a year before that. So it was in the news for various ways. So when they showcased their first scooter, I was interested. Anyway, the TVS scooty was almost I would say 10 years old by that time. So I was looking at a replacement, but there were no electric scooters in the market at that time. So uh, they were so there was a long gap, I would say, from 2009 to 2018, 17, 18. There were no electric scooters of any caliber in the market. It was the old type scooters were there, but they were not really great. There were one or two introductions which had happened in 2017, 18, but yeah, I don't know how good they were. I had not seen them and so on. But this one, there was definitely more being said. And that was also the time when lithium ion was becoming a good option in terms of the battery. So around 2016, 17 is when the lithium ion scooters started coming in. Of course, they were much more expensive. I did look at other lithium ion scooters at that time. They were all in the 70, 80,000 rupees price bracket. But I was not very keen. I was also examining the option of putting a lithium ion battery in the TVS scooter.
TVS.
So I did talk to somebody who said he could do it, but then he said that if you change the battery, you also have to change the controller because the controller is adjusted for the gel acid battery and may not work very well with the lithium ion battery. So that was one issue. Apparently, there was one person here who had done this sort of change for another client, and it seemed it was a failure because then he had to change the controller also. Now the controller is itself another 10,000 or so. So if you're changing the battery, you're buying a battery for 30,000, then you put a 10,000 on the controller. That's a pretty big expense to put on the old scooters. So I was not very keen on doing that after I came to know about this. So then it was just that scooter which I was using. Then this option came. So the Ather one I was more keen on because they had apparently done a pretty good job, from whatever I could hear. And when the bookings opened, uh, I did not book at that time. I was waiting to see what the reports were like. And those who had got the early batches, that was, I think, late 2018, early 2019 is when the product was released. And within the first 3, 4 months, a lot of very positive reports were there. So Ather has a forum in which they have discussions around the product. So I was following what was happening in the forum. I found that most people were very positive about the product. Of course, some nitty-gritty issues were there, but most of the reports were very positive. And that's when I decided to book it. And after I booked it, it took me, there was a queue, of course. It was a waiting period. So after I booked it, it took me almost 3-4 months before I could get it in July. Because those who had booked it before the launch were getting the scooters at that time. So the production was not very high at that point in time. And therefore, they were going by the waiting list order.
Yeah.
So after I got it in June, I have been using that scooter from 2019 June so far. So that's the story. So that has been a very positive experience, I would say.
Yeah. So
There's
can you
been hardly
elaborate
anything.
more as to what aspects, what features or what attributes did you find, it matched your expectations or exceeded, for example?
So of course the battery is the lithium-ion battery, but the lithium-ion battery is a very in terms of the range, it is very high. So of course I didn't necessarily need that sort of a range, but that's what the product was providing. And what they had done was to put the battery below the floor of the scooter. So that was an interesting way of designing the scooter. So they actually, what it did was the battery is the heaviest part of the scooter. So that was as low as possible, very close to the ground. And the motor is, of course, also slightly above that, but motor was not that heavy. And the motor was not fitted into the wheel. So it had a belt drive. So that particular design, I thought, was a good combination, because what it did was it made the vehicle, even though the vehicle is heavier than the TVS vehicle, it is much more, the TVS old vehicle I'm talking about, but it is much more maneuverable. It is easy. Its handling is very good, and it was comfortable to ride, and it had a very smooth ride. So that was immediately appealing. Of course, that was not really a big requirement from my side, but I could see that it would have been something that's very appealing to most people who would have been buying it. So, and also it was a very practical vehicle for people who were doing a fairly long stretches of riding. So, for example, somebody who was doing about 20 kilometers each way could easily use the scooter, whereas it was not possible for the gel acid scooters.
Okay.
So that was, I would say, a big difference.
Was the dashboard also
So,
there in this?
so the dashboard the dashboard was different. It was an electronic dashboard, not a mechanical one like the previous one. So there you had a map, you could keep some documents on the dashboard. It would tell you where you were, so you could search through the map and get directions and so on. So all those features which were there in the 450 Ather 450 were attractive. Of course, not necessarily needed by me, but it made it a very attractive proposal. So what I found was that there were a lot of people who were interested in the product. They were keen about it. They were discussing it in the forum. So that enthusiasm around this product was very high.
Yeah.
And probably this was the first viable from a regular commuter's point of view. So if you look at the comparison between a petrol scooter and this one, easily this was a good option.
Okay.
Whereas the earlier gel battery scooters were not a good option for everyone. This was clearly a good option from literally anybody who's buying a scooter may find this as a good option.
Right.
Of course, the difference was that this is more expensive compared to a typical scooter. So the most expensive petrol scooters were around the price of the scooter. So I think the most expensive petrol scooters like the Vespa, this was more expensive than the Vespa. So in that sense, the price was a deterrent for a lot of people. At a lower price, this would have been an easy buy from anybody who was considering buying a petrol scooter for regular commuting. This was a good option. The issue with the scooter was, of course, the charging, which means that you had to put up a charging infrastructure. which may not have been convenient for everybody. So
Right.
they had to find a way around for, some housing colonies did not allow people to put up charging units there. You had to persuade the housing representatives and so on, the association. Then public charging is available, but public charging is not really a very good daily option. You have to have a charging setup at home to be able to charge the scooter on a regular basis. So for those who are staying in colonies or in tall buildings and so on, it was not really a very easy option, but they had taken the trouble to find good ways to handle this. Especially, for example, there is if you keep the charger outside, which is in a public place, somebody else cannot use the charger that you have installed. It is tagged to the scooter, so only you can use it. Others cannot sort of charge their scooter there, and you end up paying the bill. So that type of precautions they had taken to ensure that the experience was positive.
Did you reuse? You could reuse your charging unit which was installed for the previous scooters for this.
No, no. So each one was different. So the charger which came with the eco vehicles was not usable on the other one because of the plug being different. The TVS charger was only for the TVS scooter, and then I had to when the I bought the Ather. The Ather came with its own charger, so I have to use that.
But
So the first release is what I have. Then they had changed it. In the first release, they had put the charger inside the vehicle. So the charging unit was just a sort of a controller to ensure that the current was steady. But the charging unit was inside the vehicle, and that used to make a lot of noise. So when you're charging it, for example, in the night, it would make a noise which would disturb people around. But within, I think, 4 or 5 months after they launched it, they removed the charger from the vehicle and introduced it into the device. So then it became more balanced. I think the noise level was much lower. So the new vehicle, they have put the charger in the box and not inside the vehicle.
okay,
So even the charger which comes with the vehicle, if you buy the charger separately, it's a much heavier device now.
okay.
So every vehicle has a different charger effectively.
Yeah, but
But
your
what
plug
Ather
point you
has
could
done is
reuse.
the plug point I can reuse, yes.
Okay,
So it's a 5 ampere plug point which I've been using. And for the latest one, it has a 15 ampere plug point, but it is used. I can use the same for
okay,
that also.
I see. And how did 450 do in the market? What is your take?
450 did very well, I would say. In terms of numbers, I think the problem was production. So whatever they could produce, they were selling. There was really uh, sh- uh, there was no stock being piled up because there was no demand. Every product they have produced has been sold, as far as I know.
Okay,
In fact, just recently they have sold out the entire stock, I think.
okay,
Last few pieces are being sold now of the 450. And they have released a new version, that is the 450X. So there are two versions of the 450X. One is called Plus and the other is called 450X. So the old version of the Ather 450 is no longer being produced.
okay,
So there has been no, but of course the demand has been. There have been a lot of people who booked and cancelled, booked and cancelled. So those type of things have happened. I suppose once the price is known, some people may have backed out
right,
because the when I bought the vehicle, it was I think I paid 116 for it, which was on the higher side. But that time the tax rate was higher. Then the tax rate went down, so it became a lot more cheaper. So then it became even better. So I didn't get the effect of the tax rate drop from 12% to 5%.
okay.
So I paid 12% tax on my vehicle, but subsequently people got vehicle for 5% GST.
Okay, so you mean to
So
say
currently the
governments,
GST is 5%.
yeah, so
Huh?
governments tax incentives for electric vehicles kicked in only from last year, you're saying?
That 12% GST reduction happened, I think, I bought in 2019
19.
July. Yeah, so I think around the end of 2019 is when the tax rate went down. It was certainly after I bought it.
I see.
So that is the GST reduction. Of course, the overall subsidy of 29,000 or so, that was there.
Okay,
So the government subsidy on electric vehicle was there, but the electric vehicle subsidy is tagged to the Aadhaar card.
okay,
So on my Aadhaar card, I can get only one two-wheeler, and that's what I used for getting the 450.
right.
So so that deduction was there, but the
Do you know
GST
how long that
reduction
has
was
been in
not there.
place? The tax
Which one?
reduction from government, when did it really start for electric vehicles in India?
I think around 2019 only,
Okay,
18 to 19, yeah,
I see.
around that time.
Okay,
So policy is relatively recent, yeah.
yeah, I see.
Earlier, electric vehicles were not given any concessions. The ones which I bought, TVS one, there was no concession at that time.
Okay,
The concession was brought in only after I think the lithium-ion batteries came in.
okay,
When the gel batteries were there, even now there is no concession for gel batteries. The concession is only for lithium-ion batteries.
do you know why?
The huh?
Do you know what is the reason? Only for,
I don't know, but I suppose the gel batteries were cheap, so there was no major reason for you to give any further discount on that. So the gel batteries are 12,000. When you replace it, you have to pay 12,000. So that's not really a major amount. Whereas the lithium-ion batteries were around 60,000, 50,000 in those days. I think 2018 or 17 or something, it was around 60,000. And that would have been difficult for people to buy unless there was a discount on that,
and now how much is it?
unless there was an incentive. Which one?
Lithium ion.
The batteries?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the battery, the Ather battery need not be replaced for a long time. So it's not really a major issue. The gel batteries have to be replaced every 3 years. But like a typical phone battery, the lithium-ion battery need not be replaced so fast. It can last as long as you don't, even if you don't use it, it will last. So it depends on the usage. So if you use it a lot, then of course the battery will run out faster. But it doesn't die out because of age, which is what used to happen with the lithium-ion with the gel battery. So this scooter, therefore, is much more viable because if I'm using it like not very heavily, the battery may last for 7-8 years or more. So it's really not a big issue in terms of replacement. It may last as long as the scooter will last. So that way, it's not a problem.
And from 450 to 450X, what do you think is a major design or product feature perspective changes they have made?
Well, there's not much of a change from 450 to 450X, as far as I know. The changes are primarily, one is the battery the earlier battery has been replaced with a better battery. Is in fact the same battery which is used in the Tesla car.
Okay.
So the lithium-ion battery within the Ather 450X is the latest available battery. It is far more denser and it has more power. So as a result of that battery change, the range has gone up. Range has gone up by at least 10 kilometers or so. So now the range is higher. It can go, I think, if you don't drive it too fast, it can go much longer. If you drive it fast, then of course the range comes down. The other thing which has happened is that they have replaced the motor with a better motor. I don't know the technical detail, but it's a better motor, and as a result of that, you can also go much faster. So the speed has gone up quite a bit. So of course, those are not very relevant for me in the sense that I'm not really going to drive it very fast. But those options have been created. It's much faster and it's much longer range, which of course may make the difference between whether to buy or not. for some people, especially those who are going long distance and so on. So it would make sense. And the scooter is much lighter now because they have removed the charger there. The motor is also a bit lighter. So overall, the scooter is much lighter, the 450X. So that's one difference. What they also did is so for those who booked the product before it was launched, they introduced what is called a Series 1, which is a very different design. It's a pure black product with the red lining. So that was a very unique type of product color which they launched, which was available only for those who booked it in January before they launched the product. Those who booked afterwards, they will not get that color. But there are a lot of people who booked it in advance and then switched out. So though they have been able to, some others have been able to swap their orders and get that. So that has just been released. So November 19th is when the first lot was released for those who had booked it in January.
Right.
So that's what has happened.
So Ganesh, after 15 years, you are still an early adopter for electric vehicles. Meaning, looks like if we just go by the technology adoption, it is still relatively, in its infancy, right? So, do you see a tipping point for electric vehicles at this point, or not really?
I think in terms of usage, a lot of people are very positive about electric vehicles today. I wouldn't say it was like that a few years back when the scooters were not really viable. But today these scooters are viable. There are some issues. One is, of course, the charging, and people are worried about whether if they run out of charge, what do you do? But of course, there are charging stations where you can charge. And another thing which has happened in the 450X is that the charging is very fast, which means that every minute you charge, you can get 1.5 kilometers. So if let's say your house is 10 kilometers away, so you can charge within 5 to 10 minutes, and the vehicle is ready for you to go home. So you don't have to spend too much time at a charging station to charge the vehicle if at all you have run out of power, which also is very unlikely unless you have gone wrong in some way. You forgot about it, or you forgot about charging it and went out and then you got into trouble. So that's a rarity, but otherwise it's not really a very difficult product to manage. It's much more easier now because the range is much more, the speed is there, it's easy to maneuver. So that way, it's a very positive product from a typical user's point of view. The problem really is one is the charging at home infrastructure, which some people may find difficult to install and maintain. And the other part is, of course, the cost. It is very expensive, and a lot of people may be dissuaded by the cost, saying that this is going to be this is a lot of upfront money to pay.
How much
Of
is
course,
it
they
right now?
try to.
What's the cost?
The
right
new
now?
scooter is 1.65 lakhs. So if you look at the other scooters, they are much cheaper than that. The other two scooters which are good in the market is one is from Bajaj, which is the Vespa electric. Sorry, not Vespa. The Vespa has not yet come, but the Bajaj Chetak is one. It's about 1.1 or 1.2 lakhs, and the TVS has also brought one scooter called Cube, which is also around the same price, 1.1, 1.2. So compared to that, the Ather is much more expensive. There is the other version, which is called the 450 Plus, which is available at 135. And it's 20,000 cheaper.
Okay.
So 145 it will come to, yeah. 165 and 145. So that's the difference.
But that means also that the consumer has more option now.
Options are there. These two products are almost similar in terms of range and terms of power range. The Bajaj one and the TVS one are similar to the Ather. But in terms of power, this Ather is much higher, but in terms of range, they are similar. I would say both of them are similar, but both of them are heavy vehicles. So this is a much lighter vehicle, much more easy to maneuver and so on. Those are somewhat heavy vehicles, more closer to the weight of a petrol vehicle. So
Yeah.
it's much heavier. Yeah.
So in the current competitive scenario, what would your strategy lens say in terms of what may differentiate at this point in the market for electric two-wheeler guys?
See, as far as I know, the Ether is clearly the best in the market. Okay, in terms of if you are willing to pay that extra money, which is almost 25,000-30,000 compared to the other two products in the market, if you're willing to pay that, this is a far better product. Both in the short run and the long run, this is a far better product. The other advantage is that a lot of software upgrades are happening on the Ether. So every time they make an improvement, you get that improvement on the vehicle.
That's not
So
there for the
it's a
other ones.
continuously.
But
I don't
TVS
know
and
for sure because they don't have that type of interface,
okay.
but they have a more conventional interface on the vehicle. But on the Ether, for example, Ether brought in what is called the dark mode, and all the vehicles got it. So, all software upgrades are available to all the users automatically. As soon as the software is made ready, it is downloaded automatically into the vehicle,
Okay.
and it's available from from the next day onwards.
Cool.
So that is clearly an advantage. So your software improvements, user interface improvements, everything is available to you.
Okay.
So it is a superior vehicle in almost all aspects, I would say, but the price difference is definitely a deterrent. The other way to look at it is how much do you save in terms of petrol.
Yeah.
So if you are a heavy user, the saving is considerable, I would say.
Okay.
Uh, Compared to using a petrol vehicle, this is far better. But I'm sure the other two vehicles are equally or maybe similar in range in terms of the petrol vehicle comparison.
Yeah.
So you are really paying for a superior product, maybe almost 10-15% extra.
Yeah.
That may appeal to some people, may not appeal to everyone.
Right.
So the other two in the market are also selling, but of course the demand for this one is very high.
Okay.
For the Ather, I think the demand is very high.
Okay.
But after the price was released, apparently some cancellations did happen.
Okay.
I know from the forum that a lot of people did cancel. So that will happen. That will go back and forth. But those who are willing to pay, this is a good option.
And when do you have some guess as to when will this e-scooter market will go to early majority phase from early adopters? Do you think any time?
The majority to happen, I think part of it will be how the policy will change also.
Okay.
Because if government says that petrol scooters will not be allowed beyond some point and all that, that will sort of make a big change.
Okay.
So that might happen at some point. But petrol vehicles, for example, buying a petrol vehicle now is not really a good option. There are very good electric vehicles available. For example, the next best option I would say is the Hero range,
Okay.
which is available around 60,000.
Okay.
So at 60,000, the Hero, and it is lithium ion. In fact, in campus, you might have seen there are a couple of institute-owned scooters, which are lithium ion Hero scooters. It's called Hero Optima, I think that's the name. So that's a pretty good scooter. It's very simple. There is no complicated, I mean, there's no software and all in that. It's basically a very basic scooter. But it uses lithium ion. It is so therefore it has a good range. It has good. It's very light. So it's a good option for a lot of people. So compared to buying a petrol scooter for 60,000, this is a very good option. So a lot of people are switching already to those options.
Okay.
So Hero has, I would say, very large sales.
Okay.
In fact, for a long time, I was debating about whether to buy the Hero one, but then the Ather came, so I just delayed it and bought the Ather. So that's why. But the Hero option was a good one, actually.
Is that the leader
So
market?
Hero had,
Is Hero the
brought
market?
in, I think, yeah, Hero has been consistently there. So after TVS went out of the market, Hero was the only one which was remaining there. Hero, they had a range of products, some 4 or 5 of them, and they were there for a long time. I mean, there was no major improvement in the product till they brought in lithium ion. But uh, so actually, lithium ion was possible even in 2005.
Okay.
Okay, it was possible to put a lithium-ion battery in a scooter in 2005. In fact, I had a chat with the CEO of Ekovehicles, and I asked him, "What about lithium-ion?" It is because lithium-ion batteries were there in the phones at that
Okay.
time.
Okay.
Cell phones had lithium-ion battery. So
Right.
I asked him, "What about lithium-ion battery? Would you look at?" So he says that doesn't make any sense because the lithium-ion battery, if I put in this vehicle, it will make the cost way above, the 30,000 vehicle will become 1 lakh
Okay.
just because of the battery. And he says that at that price point, there is no buyer here. So that was probably true. In 2005, I don't think anybody would have bought a 1 lakh scooter.
Yeah.
It was way out of range. And that is why, and then there is this issue of whether the lithium ion battery can be managed very well in the scooter. So here he was talking primarily about the price point, but he was also issues about management. So what has happened over a period of time is that the battery management has improved. The technology for managing the battery to cool it down, to ensure that it is functional over long periods of time and all that. So that has improved. And that's what has made, and the lithium ion battery price has also come down. So both of them in combination has made the product viable.
Okay.
So that happened probably around 2015 or 16.
I see.
And then the lithium-ion batteries started coming in.
Okay.
But Hero was selling the lead-acid battery product for all that while.
I see.
So they were the only ones in the market probably from 2009 or 10 onwards, all the way till 2016, 15, 16, they were the only ones in the market.
And when did they switch to lithium-ion? You're not sure.
They did it earlier. They started, I think, lithium-ion. They came in, I think, 2017 or something. Yeah.
Okay.
17, 18. Yeah, they had introduced it earlier.
Okay. So all right, Ganesh.
But I'm not sure. I need to cross-check this.
No, it's okay.
But they had introduced the product, and it was around this price point, 60,000 price point. But of course, the body is much lighter. It is made of plastic. So some of those things are there. It is not really a very robust product. Of course, the Ather product is also made of plastic. So it's not metal, but it is using a far superior quality material and so on. So that's why the cost also goes up.
Right.
So the Hero is a very good option for somebody who's not looking at paying a premium price, but looking at a good sturdy product which will last a few years. May not last as long as the Ather, but it is good enough. Is the option.
Sure. So all right, I think covered a lot of ground as to how the Z scooters have evolved. Anything before we close? Anything you want to add here, Ganesh?
Yeah, in terms of, I think the question is still open whether the market will pick up in terms of price point.
Yeah.
So there is a big market at the 60,000, 70,000 price point, but when you cross 1 lakh, the market sort of shrinks quite rapidly. So, but what has happened, I would say, is that while Ather has been operating primarily in Bangalore and Chennai, now they have gone to new markets, and every new market there are a few customers who are willing to pay that 1 lakh plus price or 1.5 lakh price. So that way there is always a market in that when you go to a new city, a few thousand people may be interested, and that way the market can be built.
Right.
Whereas the big market, which is in running into 10,000, 20,000 scooters, that market is still at the low, below 1 lakh price point.
Right, right. And perhaps as the market for, let's say, if you call the luxury vehicle goes up, even the other market might also become bigger because more
Yeah.
aware.
So what has happened what Ather has done is that people who own the 450, who shifted to 450X, they have created an exchange for them.
Okay.
It's not a direct exchange, but they will do an examination of the vehicle and give you a health card for the vehicle. So on that basis, you can say that this is the product that you want to sell, and there are people who are willing to buy, because when you sell it, it will be in the range of 80,000 or so. So at 80,000, a second-hand Ather is a good option. Okay. Compared to buying a cheaper product first-hand. So okay. It's still a product. See, it's just 1 year old, 1.5 years old. It will still last for 4 or 5 years. Right. So it's still a good buy, and it will come at a much lower price. So that is another way by which they can get a lot of new people okay. into the market. So that's a possibility.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your insights.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
fun.
you for.
Yeah. So had a good time. Thanks, Ganesh. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Stop here.